This is a pertinent time to be celebrating communion because this is the start of what is traditionally known as Holy Week. And many of the churches call this Sunday Palm Sunday. You remember the Sunday when Jesus rode on an ass into the city and the people cried, Hosanna, 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 you know. That night, Jesus went and prayed. And the next morning they came to arrest him, the mob led by Judas, the betrayer. And, you know, what happened there was quite significant. Jesus went out to them and said, who are you looking for? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, I am he. And they fell down. It was such a revelation, you know, when he said that the whole mob just fell down. And then they got up again and he said, who are you looking for? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said, well, I'm he. Take me, let these others go. And you'll remember that the disciples drew their swords. Now, I've always wondered, why did the disciples have swords in the first place? But they drew their swords, and Simon Peter cut off I think it was the servant of the high priest's ear. And Jesus said to them, stop. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. And in these troubled times where this threat of war is so significant in our lives, we must remember that. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. We need to seek for peace and restoration of nations and families and groups so that people can work together, just like then. And Jesus immediately touched that man's ear and healed it. And, you know, I've often wondered, why didn't Hollywood make a story about that man? Surely his life was changed by that experience. He went to arrest this man, his ear was cut, and the man immediately healed him. That guy's life must have been changed. And our lives must be changed by these events too. We come together, we take this simple piece of bread and we celebrate Jesus going through this week that we know he went through now, all sorts of torture and, you know, the most despicable things leading up to his crucifixion. And he did that for us, to not make himself great, but to pay the penalty for us, you know, to bring us into restoration of our relationship with him that Marcel spoke about in the Garden of Eden, you know, to bring us into that. So when we eat this, let us remember that God did this specifically for us, and we do this not as many people think that this turns into Jesus' body, but in remembrance of the body that he shed for us. Okay, so please take communion with me. And his blood was shed in all these things. And that was to remind the people that this was a sacrifice for them. They'd come from a history where blood meant sacrifice to God. And so his blood was shed, drained from his body, and so we drink this as a remembrance of that as well.